Well, hello and good afternoon. Thank you to those of you who made the time to join us today for what is, like so many other things in our life right now, a very unique and different format for doing things. We wanted to take some time this afternoon to do a town hall style format to share with you some updates from the discovery and hopefully engage in some discussion and dialogue. So first and foremost, I want to thank you, our donors, for your tremendous support of the discovery. Quite frankly, prior to the pandemic, you have been an instrumental part of the discovery's success and ongoing impact in our community. And in the last 75 days, you have demonstrated to us really your renewed commitment to us and your passion and love for our mission and need for us to be in our community. And we just can't thank you enough for that. Today, I wanted to provide you with an overview of what's been going on in the last 75 days. I want to share with you our plans for reopening the museum as soon as that's a viable option for us. Share with you a little bit of the financial impact that this has had on us and our subsequent plans to respond to that. An update about kind of our longer term plans, and then hopefully have an opportunity to engage with you and answer any questions that you have for us about the discovery. I am joined here today by Patrick Turner, who's our Vice President of Marketing and Communications. He's a good 6 feet away from me, and he's the wizard behind the curtain today, helping me make all this happen. And Patrick will field those questions. If you're watching this on the Discovery website, just below the website there, you should see a link to the YouTube Live channel. That's the place where you'll be able to submit your questions. So if you want to submit questions, go ahead and click on that link now, and it'll port you over to the YouTube live stream, and you can engage with us in the chat box. And otherwise, if you just want to watch and listen, that's fantastic as well. So one of the things we want to do too is make sure that we hear from you what more you'd like to know about what's happening at the discovery, what we're doing to respond to the pandemic, and what you need to know to make any decisions going forward. So with that, I want to share with you sort of the overview of the last 75 days. Who's counting? I'm counting. It's been 75 days since we had to close our doors here at the Discovery. That happened on March 16th, which was right at the beginning of our 2-week spring break here in Washoe County. It was perhaps the most inopportune time to shut down. It was the first day of camp. It's 2 of our busiest weeks in terms of visitation. So it was a pretty significant time to shut the museum down. However, we decided to do that really, quite frankly, just a little bit ahead of Mayor Sheevey and Governor Sisolak's decision to ultimately shut down all non-essential businesses. We saw where the science was taking us. We saw best practices around the country and in our community, and became very clear to us that it was going to be necessary to shut the museum down. So we began that process on the 16th. We moved very quickly to realizing that it was going to be more than just a couple of weeks. And so we furloughed all of our part-time and hourly staff. We reduced our salaried team at that point. Some of our salaried positions went on furlough, some of them reduced hours, and we really kept just a core team working here at the Discovery to respond to the pandemic. Very quickly, we applied for, and after about 2 weeks of sleepless nights, we received one of the Payroll Protection Program loans. You probably have heard these discussed in the news as the PPP loan. We were successful in receiving one of those loans, and we'll talk more about what that means for the organization here in just a minute. We also, through the leadership of our development team and our friends in the marketing department, we launched a comprehensive resiliency fund campaign. We knew that we were going to have to be doing some pretty significant fundraising very quickly. And our team responded and got a campaign out, being very transparent about our situation and making a direct appeal to our community. And again, I just have to stop and thank all of you for your generosity and support for the Discovery. That resiliency campaign has helped the museum prepare for the road in front of us. And again, we'll touch on that here in just a second. The last thing that we started to do very quickly was to forecast and scenario plan what our future was going to look like. Again, it became pretty clear that we were looking at something more than just a couple of weeks shutdown, and that this was going to have a much larger impact on the organization. A couple of key notes in that, throughout all of this, we have endeavored to let science drive our decision making, whether that's guided by the CDC and public health experts to what we understood about a global pandemic and how to navigate a business during that time. Science was central to our decision making as it is to our mission. And so science was in the driver's seat for a lot of this. We also worked very closely with our industry colleagues and partners, not just around the country, but around the globe. We belong to the Association of Science and Technology Centers, and the Aztec community has really come together to support one another and share best practices. And we have found that resource really valuable throughout this entire time. And I should share with you that 98.7% of science museums around the globe, that's around the entire world, 98.7% of science museums have experienced some form of shutdown and are either still shut down or were shut down for some period of time during that pandemic window. So we are not alone in the experience that we've had. And then the final piece to that is this has been a very fluid landscape. So planning for and adjusting to the situations that we're in has been a challenge, like so many of you have probably experienced in your own lives and business, that each day, each week presents a new set of challenges, a new set of information, and it has required us to be very nimble and flexible in the course that we've charted for ourselves. The advantage is that the Discovery is by nature a very nimble, flexible, and focused organization, and that the professional talent and skills of the board, our committees, our senior leadership team have really helped us navigate the situation really well. So let's talk about the results. We launched our resiliency campaign within just 2 weeks of our shutdown, which I have to tell you, in 20 plus years of being in this industry, I don't think I've ever seen a fundraising campaign go from idea to the mailbox that well and that fast in just a couple of weeks. You responded, and you responded in ways that this organization has never seen. We received $300,000 already in support. Each day, gifts continue to come into the organization, but a $300,000 response in just a few short weeks is tremendous. In addition to that support, we had the opportunity to talk with several of our donors who in the last 12 to 18 months had given some form of a restricted gift. And we went back to them and we asked them to lift those restrictions with the understanding that we would restore those projects just as quickly as we could, but with an understanding that our greatest need at this time was access to operating cash. And so nearly all of those donors responded in kind, and that freed up an additional $500,000 in operating cash, those lifts on those restrictions. And then finally, the payroll protection program, if followed to the letter, and that's one of those shifting landscape pieces, but to the best of our knowledge, we are adhering with all the requirements of the payroll protection program. And at the conclusion of that program, we can apply for that loan to be forgiven. If that indeed becomes the case, that'll result in another $331,000 of benefit to the organization. So in total, in the last 75 days, we've amassed a cash reserve of nearly $1.1 million. That's about a third of our annual operating budget. And with that, again, I have to thank you and let you know that you have made it possible for us to navigate the days, weeks, and months ahead. Once we understood that this is going to be an ongoing, lasting kind of situation, we began to study what the CDC was saying, what was coming at a national level, what the governor's office was guiding businesses to do. And again, we appreciate Governor Sisolak letting science drive so many of his decisions. And we worked with state, county, and local officials to better understand what this phased reopening of our economy would look like. We were hopeful that the Discovery would open in the coming week or so in the phase 2 plan that Governor Sisolak announced earlier this week. Indeed, museums are allowed to open in phase 2. Unfortunately, there is one sentence dictating the guidelines around museums and their operations that states that hands-on and interactive exhibitions will not be permitted during the phase 2 of operations. You all understand that hands-on interactive exhibits is what the Discovery experience is all about. And when we take that out of the equation, it just was not realistic for us to be able to move forward at this time to open the museum for public operations. That said, we are excited to share with you that June 8th, we will launch our regular full season of our camp program, our summer camp program. We have made tremendous strides in making adjustments and tweaks to that program. We have communicated to all of our camp customers and past customers about the changes that we've made to our camp program to mitigate risk for our student participants in camps. We had intended to open with what we were planning on a split operations model, which meant that we would open on the weekends to the public, and Monday through Friday would just be for our camp participants. We will still move forward with Monday through Friday just being our camp participants. And as soon as we have clearance from the governor's office, we will open the museum on the weekends for general public participation. We have a comprehensive plan for when we can reopen and how we will deal with visitor screening, staff screening, the safety and mitigation of risk as much as we can. Again, as you might imagine, there is an interesting balance between being in the business of teaching and educating in science and trying to operate and run our business in a pandemic environment. And so we have tried to create our plans in such a way that mitigate for risk. We know that we cannot eliminate all risk. And so we think we've got a pretty responsive plan for when we can reopen. The financial implications to the organization are significant. During the first phase and in our resiliency campaign, we announced that we were anticipating a $400,000 shortfall in our earned revenue through our second quarter. Recognize that in our second quarter, we had not only spring break and spring break camps, but that's also our busiest 3 months of the year for school field trips. And once learning at home was extended for the rest of the school year, obviously that took field trips off of the table. It's also a very busy time for us in the facility rental and birthday party arena. So all of that revenue, unfortunately, was lost pretty quickly. That was the $400,000 figure that we shared with you all in our resiliency fund. As we turn the page and look at our third and fourth quarter, we are anticipating 50% reduction in earned income through the balance of the year. That's a 50% reduction. So that big cash reserve I mentioned earlier is really going to be used to bridge the gaps between now and the end of this fiscal year. And quite frankly, that's probably not enough to get us through the year and into the start of the new year based on our previous plans. So some more hard decisions are probably on our horizon. There's also the risk of a second wave of infections, which could result in further mandated closures. So we're not out of the woods yet. We are optimistic that we have a financial plan to navigate the rest of this fiscal year, but it will mean other adjustments are needed. We will continue with our fundraising efforts and seeking support throughout the course of the rest of this year. And really, post-pandemic, once a vaccine is available and we are back to whatever we consider a new normal, I would anticipate that it will still take the Discovery another 12 to 18 months to sort of restore ourselves to pre-pandemic levels as an organization. Also of note, particularly for those of you that are a big fan of this event, I did want to share that we have made the decision that we will suspend Chemistry the Cocktail this year. We spent some time thinking about how we could take that into a virtual context. And ultimately what we decided is it's just such a great in-person event that trying to do that virtually didn't make a lot of sense. So we'll put that on hold for this year. However, we do have a pretty exciting plan to replace that event. And you'll hear more about that probably in the next few weeks, if not the next month. We're putting the final details on that, so I'll tease you with that, and we'll come back to you again soon with updates on that. In terms of long-term plans, I want to be very clear. The Discovery will weather this storm. I know that there's been questions asked and concerns raised about the Discovery surviving the pandemic. We know that several small businesses will not reopen. There is news around the country of museums that have already shut down and know that they will not be back post-pandemic. The Discovery is not one of those institutions. We will be here for you. We continue to serve our community during the pandemic, and we will be here on the other side of it. We might be a little battered and bruised. We might look a little different. We might have to make some adjustments in the near term. But I can tell you prior to this, a few weeks before this even, we sat in our conference room and we were looking at our long-term planning, and we were very excited to really have the next 4 or 5 years mapped out for the Discovery. And I'm optimistic that while the next 12 to 18 months might look a little bit different, the long-term plans for the organization remain intact, and we will continue to serve this community. So that is very exciting to us. During this time, we will make some adjustments to some of our big capital projects in planning. We had planned to host 2 traveling exhibitions this year. We've now dropped that down to 1, and Matter Splatter will be here for you just as soon as we are able to reopen the museum. The Nevada Gallery, which is our big new next permanent exhibit project, is still very exciting. We sat in a final drawings meeting this morning. That project continues to move forward. It will require slight adjustment to the delivery timeframe of that project. We will have to do some more fundraising for that once we're able to turn our attention back to the Nevada project. But that gallery is moving forward. We will have that one. In the midst of a global pandemic, we have been able to continue our work on our outreach feasibility study, which was supported by the Fidelity Foundation. And in a few months, by the end of this year, we will have a complete feasibility plan and set of recommendations for how we move forward and launch a statewide science outreach program. So there's lots of reason to be optimistic and excited about our plans for the future and your return to the Discovery just as soon as that becomes available. So with that, I just wanted to pause for a quick second and again encourage you to submit any questions that you might have. Again, if you're not on the live chat YouTube live link, it should be just below where you're watching on our website, so you could click over to that one. If not, if you're already on there and you have questions for us, please feel free to submit those. And I'm going to sit here and pause quietly and stare at you awkwardly while we give a little bit of time to submit any questions. So it looks like we've done such a fantastic job of updating you that there aren't any burning questions at this point. With that, I do want to share with you, if you do have questions, if you are interested in chatting with us more, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Danielle Williams. We'll be following up with you with an email, I'm sure. So all of our contact information would be in there, and we're happy to set up a one-on-one discussion, whether that's in a virtual format like this, or a phone call, or a properly social distance in-person discussion. We're happy to do all of those things. And it does look like we've got one question that came in. What is the City of Reno doing to help? They have to recognize the value of this resource. Thank you. Great question. The city, the Discovery is a private nonprofit organization. We don't receive any public funding from the city, county, state, feds. And so we are not a normally funded revenue stream through the city of Reno. There are any multitude of relief programs that have been made available. We're currently pursuing one particular option from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. IMLS was awarded funding through the last round of legislative action at the federal level. We're looking for the same kinds of programs at a state, county, and city level. The challenge that we're seeing at state, county, and city levels is that all of those budgets, while set for their current fiscal cycles, are going to take tremendous cuts in their next funding cycle. And so it's unlikely that funding will be available from public sources as we move into the coming months and or fiscal year cycles, at least the next fiscal year cycle. So we receive great accolades and support and public support of institutions like the Discovery. Financial support is not so forthcoming from public sources, for sure. We will also potentially, depending upon how much longer this current shutdown lasts for us and or the response that we get from today's format, we're likely to host more town hall style formats like this to keep you informed and updated. We would love to hear how this format worked for you today, and if there are other information that you're interested in learning about or formats in which you want to receive that information. Again, thank you for your support to the Discovery. It is donors and supporters like you that make this institution possible. We have always relied on your support, and you will always have a role in the delivery of our mission, and we cannot thank you enough for that. If I can make one ask of you today, it's that you share what you heard today, what you learned today about the Discovery, about what we're doing, about the fact that we are here and will be here just as soon as we can reopen, with your friends, with your neighbors, with community leaders that you know, and encourage them to support the Discovery. Until then, I want to encourage you all to remain safe and healthy, and we very much look forward to seeing you again soon, just as soon as that's something we can do. And please do remember that science matters. Thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend.